Welcome to the rise and fall of Benefit. So, out of every brand I've done so far in this series, their history is probably the most interesting. So as you know, the name of this series is The Rise and Fall of Blank, but not every brand that I've covered so far has had a full-on fall in terms of their sales or their success. And with Benefit, I don't think they've really fallen. Even though I would say a lot of people in the beauty community might argue they're kind of in their flop era, people are bored of Benefit, I hear that echoed constantly. But at the end of the video, when we kind of talk about where they're at today, I will share why they're actually doing pretty well, even if a lot of people in the beauty community feel that they might have fallen. So Benefit's really not a brand that I had kept up with much before prepping for this series because they're not cruelty free. I don't purchase from them. So I think learning their history was even more interesting because I just was not familiar with a lot of this. But our story goes all the way back to the 70s with the Ford twins. These are identical twin sisters, Jane and Jean. And they grew up in Indiana. They went to school in Indiana. Growing up, their mom was actually on television. And I saw in an interview that as kids, their mom would have them on TV with them, doing little songs and dances together. And Jean and Jane actually wanted to be models. And though they didn't find success in the modeling world, they did take a lot away from that in terms of learning about makeup and application. And they decided they wanted to move from Indiana to California. So they moved out to San Francisco. And when they moved there, they really did not have a plan. They just wanted to go have no responsibilities, chill, live a fun life. So they moved out there. And eventually they ran out of money and their mom was like, okay, you need to come back to Indiana now. But they didn't want to do that. So they're like, okay, we need to figure out a solution. We need to find a way to make some money. So the twins decided they were going to start a business and they really didn't have plans of what they wanted this business to be. They just knew that they needed to make money somehow. So they came up with two ideas. The first one is so Midwest, in my opinion, as a original Michigan girly. They were going to start a casserole cafe. That was their first idea they threw out. And then the second idea was to start a makeup shop. They couldn't decide, so they decided by the flip of a coin. They took a coin and flipped it, and they said, if it's heads, we're going to start a casserole shop. If it's tails, we're going to start a makeup shop. The coin decided. They started a makeup shop in San Francisco, and it was called The Face Place. And in the beginning, they didn't really have plans for this makeup brand. They didn't know that it would become this international makeup brand that it is today. They just wanted to make some money. They're just trying to break even. They're just trying to pay their rent. And in the beginning, they didn't really have a strategy. And one story you might be familiar with is the background of their most famous product, Benetint. So you probably know Benetint today as the lip and cheek stain, but that was not the original use of the product. So the story goes, an exotic dancer came into their store, The Face Place, and she was looking for something that would make her nipples more prominent while she was on stage. And I was reading an interview where Jane and I looked at each other and we said, we have that. It's just not here right now. Come back tomorrow. So they went home that night. She said, Jane came over to my apartment. We got a bunch of red food coloring. We got glycerin, rose petals, and we put it all in a blender and boiled it down to a reduction. The next day they brought it back to the store, sold it to the dancer, and that was the original use and story behind Benetint. So at that time, the dancer started recommending it to all of her fellow dancers. They started coming back and buying more, and their store started getting a little bit more buzz. And I was listening to an interview that I'm going to leave a link down below. It was actually a podcast interview with the daughters and nieces of the founders who now work for the brand. We'll get there. But they were on a podcast, and the podcast host is actually one of the co-founders of Fable and Mane. So really interesting podcast. I will leave it linked. But they were saying on the podcast that Jean and Jane would do anything to bring people into the stores. They were so focused on drawing everyone in any way that they can. She shared a story where one time they put caution tape up outside of the store. So people would be walking by, they would see the caution tape, and they're like, oh, what's going on? And then they would kind of draw their attention in and they would see, oh, well, there's a makeup store here. I should go into the store. So Face Place is growing and they're doing makeup on people coming in. And one thing they noticed along the way is that they would be doing someone's makeup, but they didn't always like the way that their eyebrows looked when they left. They're like, I wish we had a way to work on brows on site. So as we know, Benefit also has their brow component And that's when this started. So they started doing brows on the floor of the boutique. Someone would come in to get their makeup done. They're like, let me also do your brows. Full service here. And that's a really interesting component of Benefit as a makeup brand, that they have these two divisions. Not only are they selling in the retail aspect with their products, but they're also providing services. And interestingly enough, Benefit is actually the #1 employer of estheticians globally between all of their brow bars. So they've got the face place, they're doing brows on site. And from the start, the vision of the brand was to be a lot more approachable. They weren't makeup artists. Yes, they had a little bit of background in makeup from when they were trying to get into modeling, but they weren't presenting this brand as like, oh, this is a pro brand. This is supposed to be approachable. And they wanted that reflected in the names and the packaging. Their products are unique. They're a little bit quirky. They have funny names. We've got the Boing concealer, the They're Real mascara. They were trying to do some funny names, some cute packaging. The sisters even said, who says makeup has to be serious to be good? Which is interesting when you think back to the way cosmetics were packaged at the time. I know today we're like, okay, well, a lot of brands have cute names and funny packaging, but it really wasn't as common back then. It even says on their website, we're not just in the makeup business, we're in the feel-good business. Laughter and humor are at the heart of Benefit's identity. So the face place starts growing. Eventually they have 4 stores in San Francisco, and it was around 1990 when they changed the name to Benefit. Now, this next part, I didn't see confirmed anywhere. So, take this with a grain of salt, but I heard it was believed that the F in the Benefit logo, if you notice, it is italicized, whereas all the other letters look normal. Some believe the F is kind of a nod to the Ford sisters. So I think that's cute. We don't know for sure if that's why. It might just be a cute little illustration touch, but I would like to believe it stands for Ford. So right around the time that they renamed or rebranded a bit to Benefit, this was when they were searching for department store partners. And kind of as an aside, this is something I thought was really interesting, having done this series on a few different brands now. Are brands that started in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like that was the path for them. They start out small and then they're looking for retail partners to get into stores. And, at this time, like when a lot of these brands were looking for retail partners, that was pre-Ulta, pre-Sephora being in the US. So that's how consumers were buying makeup, was at the department store. And it's interesting because yes, that absolutely still happens today, but I would argue that most shoppers are buying their makeup either online or at some of these big beauty-focused retailers like Ulta or Sephora. It's also interesting to watch how customer shopping habits have evolved with the introduction of online shopping. Like when you compare to a few other brands I've covered here that were a bit newer, like KELLYG Cosmetics, Colourpop, Glossier, all of those brands started selling direct to consumer online. They didn't move into working with retail partners until way down the line. But anyways, Benefit started finding different retail partners like Henry Bendel, Harrods. The brand started to grow, and in 1999, they were acquired by LVMH. So if you're not familiar with LVMH, they are a huge luxury conglomerate. First of all, they own Sephora, but also in the cosmetic realm, they own Fenty, KVD, Fresh, Makeup Forever, but they also have a lot of brands outside of just cosmetics. They own Tiffany, they own Christian Dior, tons of different wines and spirits, like they own everything. Now, at the time of the acquisition in 1999, Benefit's annual sales were estimated to be around $20 million. And I was reading an article from 1999, Women's Wear Daily, and they said the acquisition was part of LVMH's progressive drive to build businesses in the US by acquiring hot startups. Isn't it funny to think of Benefit as a startup when now they're kind of like a legacy brand almost? They also said Benefit was the third such acquisition. The others were, wait for it, Bliss and Hard Candy. Yes, Hard Candy, the like $6 or $7 Walmart brand. And fun fact, Hard Candy used to be sold at Sephora, which obviously makes sense if LVMH owned them for a little bit there. That really surprised me though. I was like, oh, they bought Benefit at the same time they bought hard candy. I didn't even know that they once owned hard candy. So moving along in the timeline, in 2003, they opened their first real brow bar. And as we know, the brow bars are huge now. They're all over the world, like I said earlier, the #1 employer of estheticians globally. And one thing I found really interesting, just a little side note, when I was listening to the podcast interview, they said that they recently rolled out brow lamination. And when I'm listening to it, the interview is not that old. It was about 8 months ago. So I was like, oh, that's so weird that they just started doing brow lamination when that became very trendy a couple years ago. And she mentioned that because they have so many brow stores, it's actually harder for them to roll out a new service at their stores than it is to roll out a new product, because they have to train everyone in their stores. There's just a lot more that goes into adding an additional service than creating a new product. That's what she said. That kind of surprised me. I wouldn't have anticipated that. I suppose it makes sense, but I thought that was really interesting. Now, Benefit is still a family brand, and in 2008, it was taken over by the twins' daughters and nieces, and they both still work with Benefit to this day. One is a brand ambassador and one is in charge of philanthropy. They both still work with Benefit to this day. And in that interview, one of the daughters said that their real big break for Benefit was their real mascara. Now, obviously the brand is doing well before this point. They're sold in a lot of retailers. They're owned by LVMH. They were already doing well, but she said things really skyrocketed after they launched their real mascara around 2010. And she said, if you have a best-selling mascara, you've made it. That's when people are taking you seriously, whether that's retailers, consumers, a best-selling mascara held a lot of weight. And she said that really started to generate a lot of buzz for the company. This is a little bit random, but I thought it was really interesting. So on April 21st, 2012, Benefit won a Guinness World Record for accomplishing the most eyebrow waxes performed in 8 hours by a team. They completed 382 treatments. This record, they no longer hold it because it was broken again in 2017 by a team in Melbourne when they completed 435 waxes. That's so many, but I thought that was interesting. At one point, Benefit had a world record. So Benefit today, they're huge. They are sold in over 55 countries. They sell a brow product every 2 seconds. How many brow products have been sold just the time I've been sitting here to film this video? That's so many. And so it's interesting to hear the perspective that a lot of people in the beauty space think Benefit it has fallen or that they're boring. And I understand because Benefit really doesn't appear to have evolved much since they started. We don't get a lot of new products from them. It feels a bit boring as a consumer. Sometimes I'm like I said, I don't purchase from the brand, but I'm still watching. I'm like, okay, give us something different, give us something new. And they never do. But that's actually by design. So I want to talk about that. In this interview, they were saying, we don't have to do everything, and we purposefully don't. They're like, we really don't focus on color cosmetics. We're not out here doing eyeshadows. We're not out here doing a full range of different lipsticks. They said we don't have to do everything. We just have to be the best at a couple things. And Benefit specifically focuses on 3 categories and 3 categories only. It is brows, mascara, and pores. Yes, they have a few other products. They've got the Hoola bronzer, they've got the blushes, they have other things. But they're not putting a lot of weight into those. For Benefit, it is brows, mascara, and pores. Brows, mascara, and pores. That is where all of their efforts go because that is where all of their sales come from. They focus on what they're good at. And she even said that sometimes it gets boring. And she said people are always saying, do something else, but they don't want to. They've tried doing other products. They've kind of failed at other products. Their words, not mine. And so they always go back to what is safe for them, which I think is a really strong strategy that Benefit has employed because the 3 very niche, very hyper-focused categories that they keep all of their attention in are categories that you repurchase a lot. Think about it. A mascara, that needs to be replaced every 3 to 6 months. I like to keep on the side of 3 months personally. So if someone loves their Benefit mascara and they're coming back multiple times a year, those are repeat sales. Brow products I also go through pretty frequently. Kind of depends on the product and the formula, but I could go through a brow product in a month. I've done it before. At the very most, I've got a couple months out of a brow product before I need to come back and repurchase. Even their focus on pore products, I don't think those are used up as quickly as the other two categories, but in general, primers do tend to be something I go through a little bit more than other maybe like powder products like a blush or a bronzer. And Benefit says their strategy is repeat customers, getting someone to always come back. They're incredibly focused on brand loyalty. And they said in this interview that brand loyalty is a lot harder to have when it's color cosmetics. You know, think about it. Your favorite eyeshadow palette brand, yes, you might be loyal to them, but if someone else comes out with a great eyeshadow palette, like you might be interested in buying that. But when someone loves a brow product, if you've already found your holy grail brow product, like people don't really deviate away from that in the same way they might with a blush or a bronzer. Same with mascara. Like once you found a mascara that you love, like you're gonna keep buying the same one. And I'll say for a while, I have found Benefit's consistency a little bit boring, but when I think about it from this perspective, it makes sense. It feels very calculated that they are hyper-focused on the products that they know will sell, and they don't really waste their time or resources producing and selling products that are a bit more of a gamble. Now, they did have a minor scandal recently, which I want to run through. This happened over on TikTok, and you might have heard about this. There was a video posted by a creator on TikTok, and in the video, she was sharing how to do her brows with the Benefit product. A lot of people thought this video was sponsored. The creator has since come out and said, you know, the video wasn't sponsored. I just made it and happened to use a Benefit product. But in the video, she's sharing a little tutorial on how to do her brows, and she uses a photo from someone else with their eyebrows very far apart. And she says in the video, basically something to the line of like, you don't want your brows to look like this. You don't want them to be that far apart. She did not know the person whose photo she used. She didn't know who she was. She clearly didn't ask her for permission because she didn't know her. And then she posted that video, and then Benefit could not tell you why, but for some reason they reposted that video. I don't know who was thinking what at Benefit, because it's obviously a very bad look. Not only do they not have the permission from that woman to share her photo, but it's also pretty cruel to post a video on your brand's page insulting someone else's appearance. I thought that was a very tacky look from Benefit. The video has now been removed. The creator has apologized, but it was a little bit shocking. I don't really know why they thought that would have been okay, or why they thought that was an all right thing to post, especially because the woman whose photo was used was very upset about it. She made a lot of videos about it, and I can't imagine that would be so hurtful to just go onto the internet and see a video of someone insulting your appearance and saying that this is how you don't want to look. Come on, Benefit. So let me tell you my thoughts on Benefit and why I don't necessarily think that they've fallen off the way a lot of people might think that they have. So do I think Benefit is boring? Yes. Is Benefit a brand that I'm ever really intrigued by or watching for? No. But especially after understanding their strategy, I think it makes sense. I'm sure they're doing just fine. And I think it's easy from a US perspective to think, okay, Benefit doesn't have a lot of conversation around them anymore, but they're huge internationally. They're sold in so many different countries. And something that I think is brilliant on Benefit's part is their brow services. Because like I said, the company is not just the retail side of selling makeup. They're also providing services. And brows, those have to be kept up with. Let me tell you that. You're going back to get your brows done every couple months. So not only do they have built-in repeat customers on the retail side, naturally they're going to have that as well on the services side. And I wish I knew the numbers for like how much they bring in from both aspects of the company, because if you remember when Bite closed down a couple years back, they actually kept open their service, which is their Bite Lip Labs. So if you're not familiar with the Lip Labs, they have them in a lot of major cities in the US, plus in Canada, and you can go in and create your own lipstick. I've done it 3 times. It's so much fun. If you're ever in New York, there are 2 here. There's one in Soho, there's one in Williamsburg. And I was surprised because they're never that busy. Whenever I've been, like, I'm normally the only one in there. Maybe I'm just going at weird times. I don't know. But I thought it was so fascinating when Bite did close down the retail side and stopped selling makeup, they kept open that service. And I would assume when it comes to Benefit that a lot of their income is also coming from the service that they provide at their brow bars. And I think, maybe putting all your eggs in one basket wouldn't always work, but Benefit does it pretty well when it comes to eyebrows. One thing I thought was just absolutely nuts was when I went onto their website, I don't think I've ever really been on the Benefit website because they're not cruelty free, like I said, so I don't purchase from them. So I went on there specifically for this video because I'm like, let me pop around, let me see. They have a brow tab at the top of the page when there are all the different categories that you could go to. If you want to shop makeup, you have to go to the tab that says go shopping. You need to click on that, then you need to go to the different category to find the specific thing you want. There's a lot more of a journey to get to the specific makeup item you want. But not for brows. They make that as easy as possible. It is the second tab. It is its own tab. Brows. You want brows? Right here. They're constantly coming out with more brow products. And once again, people will always be repurchasing that. But beyond that, something that Benefit has that some of these newer brands might not is the name recognition. Benefit has technically been around since the 70s. I mean, more so under the name Benefit since the 90s, but it's still a very established brand. I think about the difference between those of us that are very invested in beauty, those of us here in the beauty community, and the average shopper that might not be as aware of all of these different brands. And when I think about this, I think of like my mom. If I were to say, Merit Beauty, blah, 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 here in the beauty community, we think, Merit's doing really well. Or if I were to say like Say or Tower 28, she wouldn't be familiar with that. But if I said Benefit, she would know that. Benefit is a brand you could ask a stranger on the street and they probably know. Even someone that really doesn't keep up with makeup, they've probably seen the Benefit like little ATM machines at the airport. You know what I'm talking about? Like people know who Benefit is. And that name recognition alone is really valuable for these brands like Tarte, Urban Decay, Benefit, that maybe they're not the most juicy, exciting brand out there, but people know who they are. So when they're thinking, I need to buy some new makeup, that's the section of the store that they're more likely to go to because they're familiar with the name, they have an experience with it, they trust it, and that goes a long way. And I could sit here all day and say, it's so boring that they keep launching different versions of Benetint in like every color. It's so boring that all they come out with are new shades of the same blushes. And while I stand by that, I get why they do it. And that was even mentioned in the interview. They were saying, we understand that our customers probably don't do a full face of Benefit when they're getting ready. They might be reaching for a different brand for eyeshadow. They might be doing a different foundation, a different concealer, whatever it is. But we know they're coming to us for their brows, for their pores, and for their mascara. Brows, pores, mascara. They kept saying that so many times in the interview. Brows, pores, mascara. They have whole categories in their company just for those three like niche sections of the brand. Like a whole team just focused on coming up with potential new brow products or potential new pore products or mascaras. Like that is how laser focused they are on these three. Do you think Benefit has fallen off? I'm really interested to hear. Do you think they've had this fall? I will leave my full playlist link down below if you want to watch anything else in this series. I really hope you enjoyed hearing the history behind this brand. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.